Hello everyone, this is Faith at Faith and Books. How are you doing? I seem to be losing my voice, so I'm going to make this quick. Sorry, I have to drink hot things. I'm slowly getting my hearing back. Now my voice is going. But I just wanted to make this video as a wrap-up of the September reading events. I actually did some kind of mood reading in September. I'm not going to talk about those right now, though. I'm just going to focus on the events. So very quickly, I finished reading St. Paul's epistles. We are having the Discord discussion this coming Saturday, the 12th, 5 p.m. Eastern U.S. time. And I will put the link below. The link looks like it's a pro wrestling thing because it's my son-in-law who's like the moderator or whatever, and he made the link, and because it's him, it has his little icon on it. But it is for the theology book club. So I will link that below. So that was one thing that happened in September. The other thing that happened, and I made a video I think I read it the first weekend of September, was Richard III for Shakespeare. And I also was going to explore this book, Shakespeare, Use of the Arts of Language. So I started to finally read this. This has been sitting on my shelf for a while. It's a true textbook, and it is like at least college level art of rhetoric. So it's topics of invention, argumentation. She goes into logic. It's technical, and I wanted to use it to just pull quotes out for Shakespeare, and it didn't really lend itself to that. I would like to study it sometimes. I think though it would probably be better in a class with a teacher who knew what they were doing. So I'd like to explore it further, but it just didn't serve my purposes of something to use for my commonplace book. I started a commonplace book in September. Where is it? It's over there. I won't get it. And I'm still doing it, and I really enjoy commonplacing. That has been a really, really nice thing that happened in September. So the two other events that I participated in September was Red September, which was something started by Christy Lewis at Dostoevsky in Space, and it's an exploration of communism. And my prompt was to read something by a dissident. And they had the live discussion on the 28th of September, and I had to miss it because I couldn't hear. But I did do the group read. This was the group read, The Soviet Union, A Very Short Introduction. So I kind of agreed with what they said about this book. It's not really an introduction. I think if you knew very little about the Soviet Union and you wanted to learn more, this would not be the best place to start because I think you'd find it overwhelming. It's a little too detailed maybe, and he organizes it in terms of topics. So instead of doing it chronologically, but he does provide this very nice timeline right here. Which I found helpful and I would refer back to. But what he does instead of just telling the story chronologically, he just has these kind of vague topic headings, and he writes about coercion and participation. So that's, how forced were the Soviets to do what they did, and how much did they participate, which is fuzzy because I think they were under enormous pressure and lots of brainwashing, and just fear that if you didn't go along, you would be killed. And so I think a lot of people would just sort of adapt. Poverty and wealth was another topic. Wasn't a whole lot of wealth going on. Elite and the masses. And then there's one, patriotism and multinationalism. And it has some nice maps. Let's see, there's photos. And there's a map. So, I mean, it is a resource. I just don't think it's an introduction. I think it's a little bit more advanced than that. The writer, the author, Stephen Lovell, one of the objections I had to the book, and I can see why he fell into this trap. It's such a gloom and doom history. I mean, just horrible, horrible things happen. And it was all justified by the ends justifies the means. And it was all about communism, right? But to me, communism is based on these fictions. And it has this utopian idea of what it's going to achieve. And because it's not based in anything that's realistic, you have to be very brutal to force everyone to do it, because it's not going to happen naturally. Even though it says that this is the, history. They're atheists, but they believe that history has this power, and there's an inevitability about history, and it's just a fictional thing. It's not grounded in reality. So, from the very beginning, they recognized the need to absolutely be brutal in order to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish, which they never could accomplish because it wasn't realistic. So I did find it educational, and I'm proud that I read the whole thing. I thought I was going to sit down and just glance through it in a couple of sittings, and that did not happen. Here's some more. So yeah, I thought it was worth reading. I don't think that if you feel like you know very, very little about the Soviet Union, this is not what I would turn to. I'd probably go to the children's history section or something and read something, or go in Wikipedia or something, and then maybe move on to this. Anyway, so I did get that one read. The only other thing that I completed was a middle grade, The Endless Step, by Esther, what's her name? Esther Hotzig. I had read this before. I think this is pretty well known. When I was a child, I read it. When did it come out? There's a picture. So it's her recounting her time. Oh, copyright 1968. So I was born 1960. So I probably read this, when I was 12 or so. Her family is in the part of Poland that got taken over by the Russians, while the Russians or the Soviets were still allies of Nazi Germany. And so they arrest like 1 million Poles. And it wasn't based on them being Jewish. They weren't after them for being Jewish, but her family was arrested because they were bourgeoisie. And because, her parents had been successful businessmen. I mean, they were just upper middle class. They weren't rich. But they were a Jewish family. But I mean, that was the charge that the Russians, but they were put into a cattle car with 1 million other Poles, and many of them were peasants. It was they just had to round up a certain number of Poles. And they have this horrendous 6-week trip in cattle cars where they're barely fed anything. There's no place to go to the bathroom. I mean, it's just horrible. They're crowded in there. No bathing. It was just awful. And then they have to walk like 4 miles, and they wind up in this at this what was it? Gypsum mine in Siberia. So it tells the story of, I think they're there about 4 years, and I think she was about 10 when they were arrested. Harrowing story, but actually they were saved from the Holocaust because the rest of their family was killed in concentration camps. So they were actually saved, even though they almost died. I mean, they were, the danger of freezing to death or starving to death was real. But good things happened too. She got to go to school. She made some friends. She was way out in the middle of Siberia in a little village, and those people weren't, what was happening in Moscow and stuff was kind of far away. They were kind of a little bit protected from that, although not completely protected. Anyway, a very, very excellent story. I highly, highly recommend this one. And then I read part of the Gulag Archipelago. I started this in August, and it was going to finish it in September, and I got to page 225. So this is a very hard read. It's the brutality. He's very upfront with all the horrible, absurd, violent, crazy, horrific things that were going on. And he's absolutely horrified that his fellow Russians participate in all this stuff. And that's a lesson I've learned so far from this, is that the government deliberately pitted its citizens against each other for its own power, for the sake of its own power. And I just feel like that's the cautionary tale to get from this, that we should not let people divide us. I think it goes on a lot. It's not going to be the same thing as Stalin doing it in our country, but I feel like social media does it, and the two big parties do it to, are trying to divide us. All those little nasty memes that people send around mocking the other side, all that stuff is to divide us, and we shouldn't let ourselves be divided, because we're all citizens here, and we live here, and we're trying to thrive here, and we want our community to thrive. We have to think about the common good and not be so tribalistic. And that's what I've gotten so far. Now, I'm pausing this because I'm going to just focus for the month of October. I'm going to focus on Victober mostly. A few other things too. But I'm going to pick this up again in November. I have every intention of finishing it this year. And I eventually like to read all 3 volumes. I think Solzhenitsyn is an interesting person, really intriguing, very good writer. Yeah, I think it's worthwhile. I could not read it at night, right before bed, because it's too horrifying. So I had to read it during the day, which also I don't get as much time during the day usually. So yeah. So anyway, but I do want to finish this by the end of the year. And then I also started to read another dissident, Václav Havel's Disturbing the Peace. And I did not get that far in this one, mainly because it was too much to have both of these going on, because there's so many Russian names and things referred to that I don't know. It's just very detailed Russian history and what was going on at the time. And then we go to Czechoslovakia, same thing. There's just so many details and so many names, and a lot of it was going over my head. And this is an interview with him. And this guy was a dissident. He was imprisoned. And then when he was a playwright, and so he sort of used his playwriting as a platform. And he, but when they broke away from he was instrumental in leading the movement to break away from the Soviet Union. He was the first president of Czechoslovakia, and then he was the one that was in charge when they did a peaceful split with Slovakia. So it's Czech Republic and Slovakia now. And then he was the president of the Czech Republic for, I think, 8 years. So he was just a man of great moral courage who was in the right place at the right time. And I would love to read this book at some point. I really would love to finish it because I think he was fascinating. But I don't know when I'm going to do it. I don't know when I'm going to do it. So I'm not really DNFing it. I don't want to DNF it, but I just don't know when I'm going to get to it. So, yeah, that's kind of sad. All right, and then the other thing that I participated in September, was Framed in September, which was an art readathon. And I hardly watched any videos. I don't think I was very vocal with the people who were actually hosting the event, but I did participate because earlier in the year, I read the letters of Vincent van Gogh. It took me about 5 months to get through these letters. I was buddy reading it with 2 other people, Deirdre at Eden Restored. Yes, that's the channel. And Linda Jo at Elder Talk. And that was a wonderful experience. I really, really loved it. And while I was reading this, because he's mentioning all these paintings, I went out to Barnes & Noble and I bought this discounted book on with his paintings. And I loved leafing through this and looking at all the, in fact, I'm having, I'm daydreaming about what prints to buy and where I would put them up in my house and stuff. I'm really becoming a Van Gogh fan. And then for Framed in September, we read this book, The Secret Life of Sunflowers, by Marta Molnar. Because we wanted to learn more, Linda was the one that spearheaded this. We wanted to learn more about Joe Van Gogh, who was married to Theo Van Gogh. All these letters are to Theo. And she is the one that was instrumental in making Van Gogh famous. Like he had hardly been heard of before he died. He had a couple of, he was just beginning to show his paintings, literally months before he died. And he had one really good reviewer write an article about him. He was just at the beginning of breaking out. And then he was going crazy, and he in a fit of insanity, he killed himself. And so she is the one, she inherited, then her husband died 6 months later. So she was the one, she had all these paintings, and she just tirelessly advocated for Vincent van Gogh, mostly out of loyalty to her husband, who had loved his brother so much and thought his brother was so talented. And so she did it for that reason. And that's actually her. So we thought this would be a really neat book to read. It's a historical fiction, but it's like dual timeline. I think I'm not a dual timeline person. I thought it was mediocre. Like, I would give it 2.5 stars. I did finish it. For me, 3 stars means it's worth finishing. I don't know if this was worth finishing. The modern story is, it's just really fluffy rom-com, just cringeworthy at times, absolutely cringeworthy. Yeah, not good. And then the one that I was more interested in, which was the historical one about Joe Van Gogh. I mean, I think she did her research. I will give this woman that. She did her research, and she was pretty faithful to Joe's story. It was just so wooden, and it could have been fleshed out, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work. Felt really uneven. I felt like the author is much more invested in the fluffy, stupid rom-com that was awful, rather than telling her story. And it just was too uneven, and it was disappointing, and I didn't like, I found it so irritating. I had to like stop and go and read other books to cleanse my palate. So I would not recommend that particular book. But then Linda, oh my gosh, I can't talk this morning. Not only am I losing my voice, I cannot remember any names. Maybe I was the one that did it. I might have discovered this, a memoir of Vincent van Gogh written by Joe Van Gogh Bonger. For some reason, they do it that way, with the husband's name first and then her maiden name. So this is what she actually wrote, and it's got lots and lots of prints in it too. But this is a very touching short memoir. And she was so intelligent, and she had such a good heart. She was really amazing. So this is a very nice memoir of Van Gogh and his relationship with her husband, and it just really, the whole Van Gogh family. She was very, let me see if I can find that photo. She was very, even though she was only married to Theo for a couple years, she had the only grandchild, and who they named after Vincent van Gogh. So Vincent van Gogh was her son's name. And she was very close to her mother-in-law. She took care of her mother-in-law. She was just, this woman had a heart of gold. Theo lucked out. Oh, I can't find it now. There's a photo somewhere of her with her mother-in-law and her son. And anyway, can't find it. Anyway, this was very worthwhile. I really enjoyed reading that. So, yeah, so I think that's it. So it's Red September, Framed in September. Oh, I meant to make this shorter. It's now 20 minutes long. I'm sorry. But I will link the St. Paul, or the Paul's Epistles Discord discussion link below, okay? All right. I hope that was coherent. I'm going to go get a cough drop. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. I hope you're doing well. Happy Victober and happy reading. Bye.